Hey, welcome back. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses preach? You might think the answer is obvious, but it's not. Jehovah's Witnesses call it the preaching work, but it's not actually work, it's a ritual. The preaching work is a ritualistic and embodied subjugation to the dogma. It's how you act out your submission to the belief system. In some sense, it might even be called self-flagellation, like the medieval monks who would walk through towns and villages naked, whipping themselves on the back to demonstrate just how repentant they were and how devoted they were to God and how they despised their earthly existence. It's also self-indoctrination. It's a defense mechanism against the obvious absurdity of many of the beliefs. It's a performance of reputation management and a method of community monitoring or policing to ensure that the faithful are going along with the necessary rituals and devoting enough of their time to cult activities. It's also a savage consumer of a person's emotional and intellectual energies and on their precious time. But the official reasons that Jehovah's Witnesses will give you for why they preach are based on Matthew 24:14, where Jesus commanded his apostles to preach, and Matthew 28, where he tells them to go and make disciples and baptize people in his name. But the very controlled and structured manner and the extremely supervised way that is done demonstrates that there's far more to the witnesses' preaching than just obeying these commands in the Bible. Witnesses don't just have to preach, but they have to preach within the structure that's set up within the religion. So you can't just go preach by yourself, because if you do, people will be asking you, well, why weren't you at the meetings for field service? Witnesses gather in small groups where they're given some half-baked pep talk to prepare them for their preaching, and people are expected to attend those. And this to some extent is to motivate and encourage people, because most witnesses don't like preaching. They hate it. Doing something that you despise and hate with other people is easier, right? It just reminds you of what a very good boy you're being, or girl. You are voluntarily sacrificing your time and your effort and your energies to do something you don't like, to knock on doors that you don't want to knock on, to speak to people who don't want to be preached at, and that you are very confident will have no useful purpose whatsoever. The most satisfying part of the ritual is when it ends or when there's a tea break. You go through this ritual because you want other witnesses to see that you're performing the ritual. And other witnesses do it so that they can see that you are also demeaning yourself by going through this pointless ritual. And so there's a community monitoring going on where everyone is trying to make sure everyone else is on board with this ritualistic practice. The preaching work is also like an initiation into a group. Lots of groups have initiation ceremonies, and you might think that baptism is that initiation, and to a large extent that would be the case, but preaching is a very, very difficult thing for many people to get involved in. It's much like public speaking. People are terrified of it, and knocking on strangers' doors to tell them that you have answers that they don't, and it's from a book that they almost certainly will have no interest in discussing. It's quite a challenge. And what's very interesting about initiation acts is that the worse they are, the more difficult they are, the more humiliating they are, the more people tend to associate positive feelings with after they have gone through with it. Dan Ariely, in his book The Upside of Irrationality, this is a paraphrase, whether the group is a fraternity or tenured faculty, the more difficult, painful and humiliating the initiation process, the higher value members will place on the group. The mere act of devoting time and effort changes the way we evaluate it. So the very fact that preaching is extremely difficult and that people don't like going through, and to a large extent is humiliating, this is why witnesses attribute such huge value to it. It's a really big sacrifice, it's very difficult to be involved in, and so they are just psychologically attaching value to this because it is such huge effort to be involved in. The preaching work, or the preaching ritual, is also self-indoctrination. When you go from door to door to tell other people all of the things that you believe and all the knowledge that you possess and they don't, you are in a very, very focused mindset. You are ready to offer reasons for what you believe in. You have a script in your mind about what the truth is, how you can best explain it to this person. And so, for the most part, you are talking yourself into believing in this, even though you already believe in it. It's a deeper indoctrination. The more you're saying this to yourself, the more you're speaking publicly about your beliefs, the more you espouse emphatically that this is the truth and that you have these answers, the more you're indoctrinating yourself. The preaching ritual also keeps people extremely busy. And this isn't the only facet of life in the organization. There's the meetings and there's assemblies, there's participation in meetings, there's preparation for the meetings. There's also the preaching ritual and the effort and time that goes into that. The activities in the organization essentially suck up any free time that you have. And it's tailor-made to ensure that no matter what your circumstances are, you can fill out all of your free time doing these activities. And the less time that you have, the less time that you're able to think or to just pause for a moment and consider what it is you're doing. Steve Hassan said in his book Combating Cult Mind Control that cult members are also kept so busy that they don't have time to think and seek outside answers to questions. When they do read, it is primarily cult-generated propaganda or material that has been censored to keep members focused. This is extremely true when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses. They are bombarded with literature. They are encouraged to read Watchtower literature constantly. They are discouraged from reading outside information. And they are kept extremely busy doing work that serves the organization. The preaching work also reminds people just how different they are from other people. They go knocking on doors on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, the evenings. They believe very odd things. They try and convert others to believing the same thing. They don't get involved in many of the normal practices and celebrations in everyday life. And so the preaching work just really drills home just how different they are from other people. And this is a really, really important facet of how to generate a sense of community and keep solidarity high within a group. Professor Yuppe said that social strength or maintenance of community is attained by creating strong ties within the congregation, primarily due to emphasizing the difference with the larger community. And so all of these little minor differences that witnesses have from the rest of the world are merely reinforced when they go out knocking on doors to try and convince people that their way of doing things is correct. It's interesting also that the preaching work is actually a natural reaction to how untrue the dogma is. The proselytizing fanatic strengthens his own faith by converting others. The creed whose legitimacy is most easily challenged is likely to develop the strongest proselytizing impulse. So it's almost as if it's a defense mechanism to stop you from thinking about how manifestly absurd your beliefs are. Just keep talking about it. Keep telling other people that it's true. You might even call what you believe the truth. Leon Festinger, the famous social psychologist who developed the idea of cognitive dissonance, said that a person with this mindset thinks like this: if more and more people can be persuaded that a system of belief is correct, then clearly it must, after all, be correct. So here's the perverse thing about the preaching of Jehovah's Witnesses. It distracts them from just how wrong they are. If anyone listens to them, it's confirmation that what they believe is true because people are responding to it. If people don't respond or react negatively, it is also confirmation that what they believe is true because Jesus said most people would take no note of their preaching. This is just how perverse the whole dynamic of this preaching ritual is. It has multiple layers of artificiality stacked up on itself. And even though witnesses might not like what they're doing, and the vast majority of them don't like preaching, it does give them a sense that they are involved in this big, grand cosmic drama that's unfolding in the last days before God brings an end to everything at Armageddon. They feel that what they're doing is meaningful because they're being used by God to carry out a very important warning and teaching work. So the governing body, whether they realize it or not, have really prepared this preaching ritual in a very effective way to control how people think and how they behave. They regularly praise people who are very active in the work, and they are critical of those who would dare to have personal goals or ambitions that don't center around the preaching work or serving the organization. Can you imagine for 1 minute just how much respect and admiration Jehovah's Witnesses would engender within the community if they spent the 1 billion+ hours every year doing helpful and constructive things for people? If they met in groups at the weekend and went picking up trash or rubbish on the street, or helped the homeless, or paid community visits to the elderly or the sick, did real world, helpful, constructive things to help the community, it would be a completely different organization, and it would liberate people from feeling so useless and so despised. So I think we can safely say that even though Jehovah's Witnesses are famous for this preaching work, and they really do believe that they have good reasons for what they're doing, they in fact really don't know why the preaching work is so important to the group. And if they did, the vast majority of them would probably stop doing it. So thanks for watching. That's all I have today, and I'll see you next time.